Crash Bandicoot 2 was a roaring success for Naughty Dog, not just in terms of technical achievement, but also in terms of sales. Yet, despite its critical and commercial success, Rubin notes that Mark, Cerny and I were always unhappy with the gameplay. I don't just mean the early gameplay, I mean always unhappy with the gameplay, period. I know in retrospect that I was too hard on the team quite often because of this, and that perhaps more often than not I was too poignant when voicing my frustration, but I think a certain amount of frustration and pain is inherent in making gameplay success. And so, in January 1998, Naughty Dog set to work on the third installment of Crash Bandicoot. With Crash Bandicoot 2 Patstrikesback and Crash Bandicoot Warped, we were able to improve the technology and offer a slicker, more detailed game experience in successfully less development time. Whereas Crash 1 took 2 years to develop, Crash 2 took just over a year, and by the time Naughty Dog reached Crash 3, they had only 9 months to develop the entire game. With the development of Crash Bandicoot 2's Ghoul engine, Game Object-Oriented List, or Game Oriented Object List, depending on your source, Crash 3 Warped would go on to utilise the same engine in order to bring twice the amount of enemies, an ever larger range of gameplay mechanics, and almost double the amount of Ghoul code lines. For comparison, Crash 3 sported 122,000 code lines, whereas Crash 2 contained 68,000 and Crash 1 had 49,000, a vast increase for the sequels. The increased gameplay mechanics included vehicles for both Crash and his sister Coco to use throughout several levels. These varied the traditional gameplay and allowed new ways for the player to enjoy the game. Players could experience scuba diving in an underwater environment, jet skiing across the waves as Coco, ride a motorbike down desert roads, ride biplanes in free-roaming environments, and, of course, ride on the back of Baby Tiger Purah, as homage to the polar levels and hog levels from the previous 2 installments. In addition, the new time trial mode allowed players to replay levels and compete against a pre-designated time in order to obtain a Sapphire Relic. If players were particularly speedy in racing to the level's end, they could be awarded a Gold Relic, or even a Platinum Relic. For the game's final gem and 105% completion, at least a Gold Relic is needed for every level. If the players wished to go beyond the Platinum Relic times, they could try to beat the developer's own time trial times, which presented themselves at the end of the NTSC version's credits. Even today, these levels provide challenge with players across the world competing for the best time and elevate themselves to world record status. Even I, myself, have attained and lost the title with several levels from the game. And HP kept beating my Mad Bomber's time, that good for nothing, just admin of awesome smacks. In fact, it was this very focus on time that the game's premise centered around. The story saw Crash, Coco and Aku Aku warping through different time periods in order to obtain the rare crystals as featured in Crash 2, before they were obtained and used in the previous game. Cortex and his cronies also attempted to do the same thing for wait, what do they want the crystals for? Stop the video, no, just stop! I've only just realised that Cortex's crystal collection makes no sense! I mean, at least in Crash 2, it was to power his Cortex space station, brainwashing laser, but in this game, I need to lie down, or play Crash Boom Bang or something. Cortex is collecting crystals for the great Uka Uka, the evil brother to Aku Aku, who was released from his temple prison due to Cortex's exploding space station. Why he wants crystals or even gems is a mystery to me, but it gives reason for both Cortex's minions and the player to warp through time using new Dr. Entropy's Time Twister device. This machine is where the game takes place outside of the levels and acts as a warp room for both Crash and Coco. Within the Time Twister are 5 separate time chambers in which one of Cortex's side resides, such as Tiny, Dingodile, Entropy, Engine, and finally Cortex himself. Each level provided a key time period in which the crystal resided in. Medieval England, the Caribbean pirate seas, an underwater Atlantis, the building of the Great Wall of China, the prehistoric era, ancient Rome, the American 50s, ancient Egypt, the Ice Ages, medieval Arabia, the scars of World War II, the 1969 moon landing, and even the far future. Coco was even playable, although only really on vehicles besides briefly at the start of the Great Wall levels. In fact, when one compares the backgrounds of these Great Wall levels, amongst others, with those of Crash 2, one can begin to realise the scope in how open the view became in comparison to the walled-in ones of games prior. In order to further differentiate the third Crash game, we modified the engine to support long-distance views and level of detail (LOD) features. Crash Warped has a much more open look than the previous games, with views up to 10 times as far. Andy. And it's evident that most of the levels look far more open because of it, despite their linearity. Even the animations were taken to the next level, with Crash's shadow being a fully animated sprite as opposed to the circular shadow present in the game's prequels. The deaths present in Crash 2 were all added to, giving Crash and Kota a plethora of ways to explode, be smashed, eaten, squashed, kissed, erased, spun, Crash hit with a paddle, lose his shorts, and so much more. Boss characters even received special time tunnel scenes in which they were in high resolution, talking trash to the Bandicoots. Their faces all animated smoothly and saw eye movement unlike the head models present in Crash 2. In regards to music, Crash 3 incorporated new versions of previous character themes, such as a more olden sounding theme for Tiny's Coliseum boss fights as opposed to his futuristic Crash 2 version, as well as a brand new opening theme. I liked to use variations of the main title themes in each game. The reality is, the graphics for the main title sequences weren't done until very late in the schedule, and therefore I didn't write the main title themes until late in the game, so to speak, stated composer Josh Mancell. Therefore, remixes of Crash 3's title theme appear at various points within the game, such as during the bonus stages and in the main warp room the game takes place in. Naughty Dog also packed the game full of secrets. Naughty Dog, having been next door to developers Insomniac at Universal Interactive Studios, became company buddies with the then upcoming Spyro the Dragon developers. Having traded tips and aided each other, both allowed demos of each other's games in their own. As such, the original Spyro the Dragon features a Crash Warped demo, and Crash Warped provides a Spyro demo at the title screen. Players would have to input up, down, left, right, square to unlock the option to access it. Crash 3 also gave players 2 secret levels, only found by crashing into an alien sign or getting caught on a pterodactyl, as well as incorporated a secret time chamber beneath the warp room, much like what was present in Crash 2. Players could unlock access to this chamber by obtaining at least 5 relics through time trial, allowing access to 3 new levels and 2 new areas to previous levels. Much like the previous games and also the ones thereafter, Crash Warped provided level names in the form of puns or references to pop culture. Level names such as Hang 'em High and Tomb Raider provided tongue-in-cheek humour to areas beyond the gameplay or death animations, alluding to the spaghetti western of the same name and Lara Croft's video game outings. Particular names worthy of note are ones from the secret time chamber. Ski Craze shares its name with a game made by Jason Rubin and Andy Gavin in 1986, whilst Rings of Power shares its title with another of their games created in 1989. It's almost as if the creator and co-creator have traversed back in time themselves to provide level names for their first and last Jam software titles. Our mantra became help weak players without changing the game from the better players, Jason Rubin states. We call all this DDA, Dynamic Difficulty Adjustment, and at the time the extent to which we did this was pretty novel. What Rubin refers to here is something that would be forgotten in subsequent platforming Crash games, having been taken over by other developers. Crash 1, 2 and 3 all features ways around frustration in gaming, such as gaining an Aku Aku mask when the player dies up to 5 times in a row before reaching the next checkpoint, or transforming another crate into a checkpoint when the player had less than a certain amount of lives. Crash Warped was the last game to allow less hardened players to still do well at the game as those who were seasoned at it. Seasoning. Another small feature of note is that Crash Warped gave players a special move after beating a boss fight, allowing for growth of Crash's abilities. These included the Super Belly Flop, Double Jump, Death Tornado Spin, a Wumpa Bazooka, and a Crash Dash ability, making it easier to obtain relics. When combined with other moves, other areas could be accessed, like combining the slide move with the Double Jump and Death Tornado Spin allowed Crash to jump high and hover over a larger distance than usual. Reception for the game was highly positive. In 3 years, Crash Warped received 5.7 million units worldwide after its initial release in October 1998. In Japan alone, Crash 3 Warped sold over 1 million units by June 1999, the first foreign game to do so in Japan, earning it the Platinum Award thanks to its international marketing and Naughty Dog's care with the title. In fact, Crash was such a success in Japan that advertisements of the original game provided a comical dance for the Bandicoot in which many people would join in and dance to. As such, a cut-down version of this very dance was placed in Crash 2 upon Crash's retrieval of a gem or beating a boss, and again in Crash 3. However, it's only in Japan's NTSC-J version of the game that Crash can be seen doing his infamous Crash dance at the title screen, along with the original song that went along with it. The Japanese version also featured full motion videos, FMVs, of bizarre Crash scenarios. Crash 3 was also one of the first few video games that could use the Pocket Station in Japan. This mini device allowed people to look after a Tamagotchi version of Crash, but was unfortunately short-lived. In fact, Japan impacted on the Crash series as a whole, introducing one of the most bizarre and secret Crash characters of all time, Fake Crash. Mark Cerny, Universal Interactive's representative on Crash, stated, "Fake Crash was originally a gag developed for the Japanese television advertising campaign for Crash 2. He did, however, find his way into Crash Warped once players had obtained a certain amount of gold relics. He would appear in Toad Village, making waves on Road Crash, although not in every regional version of the game." Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped marked the end of a platforming era for Naughty Dog on the original PlayStation console. As part of the development team prepared themselves for Project Y for the upcoming PlayStation 2, the rest started development on one last Crash game that went beyond the contract they had signed with Universal for 3 games, right at the start of Crash Bandicoot 1. And with that, I'll leave you with one final quote from Andy Gavin, who states, "In a lot of ways, Crash was the last of the great video game mascot characters, despite the fact that Sony never really wanted a mascot. We set out to fill this void, and made a game to do it, but we never really expected, only hoped, that it would happen. By the end of PS2 and Xbox, the youthful generation of video game players had grown up, and platforms began to appeal to a much wider age range. With this, and increased graphics horsepower that made possible more realistic games, came a shift to more mature subjects. The era of GTA, of Modern Warfare, and Halo. Sophisticated and dark games mirroring R-rated action movies. A part of me misses the simple but highly crafted comic fun Crash represented."